According to the World Bank, this pandemic has triggered the deepest global recession in decades. While the ultimate outcome is still uncertain, the pandemic will result in contractions across the vast majority of emerging markets and developing countries. So, how this pandemic has impacted aviation, and what is the future of the industry might look like post-COVID-19? Hello again. My name is Abdul Hakim Al-Tamimi. I'm the CEO of Al-Tamimi Aviation Consulting. Before we get to what the future might look like for the aviation industry, let's look at some of the COVID-19 global economic impact according to some international organization estimates. According to the World Bank, global GDP will contract by 5.2% in 2020. 2021 will look somewhat better in light of the recent emergency authorization of the Pfizer vaccine. However, it will take some time to see meaningful recovery. As for the aviation industry, it is not a stranger to managing crisis. It has faced a number of challenges in the past, but nothing compares to this crisis. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the whole industry felt like it's falling off a cliff. If we compare this current crisis to 9/11 or the economic crisis of 2008, we will see some minimal similarity. For example, during the 9/11 crisis, airlines were impacted due to security concerns by the public. But in no time, people returned to flying after gaining confidence. Governments around the world have put in place very strict security measures on airports, airlines, and crew and passengers that will stay with us and will stay forever. Today, our airports are more secure. Crew must go through strict background checks, and passenger data is made available to all relevant agencies prior to boarding. No doubt, some airlines suffered during the 9/11 crisis. Some of them declared bankruptcy, and some went out of business. But the global economic impact was somewhat limited, and economies returned to growth quickly. The aviation industry is very resilient, but sensitive to economic downturns. It is the first industry to be affected and the last to recover. During the crisis of 2008, the economic impact on aviation was very strong. We witnessed airlines go out of business, declare bankruptcy, and many have lost their jobs. We also saw governments get involved and provide financial assistance to airlines. No doubt, the damage was great, but the industry pulled out of it despite some challenges like high fuel prices at that time. The scenario took few years to overcome, and we started to see unprecedented growth across the aviation global landscape. The uninterrupted growth post-2008 crisis was the longest in the history of aviation, especially in some parts of the world like the Far East, the Middle East, and North America. It was fueled by good global economic growth. However, short before COVID-19, we started to see some weakening economic performance of some airlines in certain parts of the world. But the majority of airlines performed exceptionally well. That continued until the whole world came to a halt due to COVID-19. The world borders and businesses shut down, and with it, thousands of aircraft around the world were grounded. For a couple of months, the picture looked very grim, with people losing their jobs and businesses are going out of business fast. Airlines were hit with a situation that they have never thought was possible. Thousands of aircraft were grounded and entered into storage programs, or simply left parked at airports around the world. The aviation industry is very fragile, and its survival depends heavily on keeping aircraft in the air to generate income. Parking the entire fleet for prolonged periods of time is a recipe for disaster for any airline. Every airline in the world had one new and only priority, and that is survival. They were running out of cash fast. Keeping airlines on the ground also has a disastrous effect on the industry as a whole, including airports, ground handling companies, air traffic control, OEMs, leasing companies, etc. Governments in some parts of the world got involved and provided some aid to airlines. Some aid is not free and has to be paid back, thus increasing debt and liability to an already bad situation. During the summer, we have seen some return to flying, although it was a fraction of 2019 numbers, but it was short-lived. After the summer, most of the large markets started to go through what is called the second wave, and now we are witnessing the third wave. Some borders are still closed. Now, let us go through what I have put together from some data I have collected from some of the reports made by our colleagues at ICAO, IATA, and ACI. This slide gives us an overview of the global GDP contraction in 2020. According to the World Bank, they estimate a 5.2% contraction. And in this slide, we see the estimated impact on aviation, tourism, trade, and economy in 2020. Air passenger traffic has taken a hit with 59 to 60% reduction. Airport has lost an approximate 60% of passenger traffic and $104 billion in revenue. Airlines revenue have declined by 54.7% of revenue passenger kilometer. Tourism was hit very hard by a decline of almost $1.1 trillion compared to $1.5 trillion generated in 2019. Trade was down by 9.2%, and the global economy will contract by 4.4 to 5.2%. Let us dig deeper into some of the numbers before we continue to what I think the aviation industry will do post-COVID-19. Full year 2020 will see an overall reduction of 51% of seats offered by airlines, and also an overall reduction by about 2.8 billion passengers and approximately $391 billion in losses. For the first half of 2021, we will see an overall reduction of 32 to 45% of seats offered by airlines. Overall reduction of 1.2 billion passengers and approximately $185 billion in potential losses. Here we can see the impact of international and domestic passenger traffic by region. And for airports, as I said earlier, the estimated loss is $104 billion. Here in this slide, broken down by region. This slide shows the potential loss of $84 billion, also broken down by region. Asia, Europe, and North America make up the majority of losses. Air traffic control is not exempt from the impact. This slide shows €110 billion loss for airlines, airports, and ANSP in Europe in 2020 alone. African airlines will lose about $8.5 billion in passenger revenue losses. The Middle East will see a decline of 57% of passenger traffic in 2020. International tourism was impacted with $1.1 trillion of revenue losses, while an estimated 197 million people have lost their job in this important source of global employment. As for trade, the world trade has fallen by 9.2%. Now that we have a complete picture of the impact, let us see what will be the possible outcome from this once-in-a-lifetime crisis. First of all, I would like to recognize that many people's lives were impacted by this pandemic to no fault of their own. I sympathize with you, and I hope you will return to work as soon as possible. As I mentioned before, this industry is very resilient and will pull out of the crisis. However, until then, I am sure that every company's board and executive are thinking and discussing ways to recover from this spin. Industry leaders have a golden opportunity to reinvent this industry, and with some long-awaited changes that need to take place, not only to deal with this pandemic, but also to improve the way companies do business and OEMs develop new technologies. Some of the changes we might see in the future were conditional in some countries for airlines to receive government bailout that include a more focused customer service and environmental issues as well. Navigating the industry to a successful recovery will depend on several factors. For example, the time it takes for the pandemic to disappear, or at least we learn how to cope with it and learn how to neutralize its threat. The vaccine authorization is one step in the right direction. How involved will governments be providing financial aid to airlines, airports, air traffic, and other industry elements? What will the business community do with business travel? Online meeting technology have demonstrated that it is an effective means of communicating across the world without the need to have in-person meetings. This point is extremely important to airlines' bottom line. While business travelers might represent 10 to 12% of the overall travelers, but they also represent more than 50% of the airline's passenger revenue. When will the economic situation recover and employment return to normal numbers so the average individual can think about taking time off for personal and vacation travel? Also, are governments ready to open their borders to international traffic? Are airlines ready to meet demand? Some airlines have put their aircraft in storage or returned them to lessors and let go of some of their staff. Conducting maintenance to return aircraft to operation will take time and money. So will aircraft leasing, crew and staff rehiring and training. All this costs money that airlines don't have. As we can see, there are a number of challenges that will put obstacles in the way of complete recovery. Therefore, taking into consideration the points I just covered, I see that recovery will be slow and painful to some airlines. We will unfortunately see some airlines cease to exist. Despite all the negativity, I am optimistic and excited about the future of this industry. You might ask why. This crisis has been painful to many airlines and employees alike. But we have an opportunity to reinvent this industry to become more efficient, safer, and more customer and environmentally friendly. Prior to COVID-19, we were witnessing slow changes that will be accelerated post-COVID-19. For example, we were witnessing airlines getting rid of inefficient fleet, especially the large super jumbos like the Airbus 380 and the Boeing 747. We have seen that aviation was slowly catching up with technological advances achieved by other industries. We have seen new generation of aircraft and engines that will make travel more efficient and cost-effective and environmentally friendly. And we have also seen the beginning of the end of the international hub and spoke system and the rise of point-to-point travel, thanks to the technological advances made to aircraft design. and engines. The end of this pandemic will accelerate this change, but this will also create new type of challenges to airlines, such as the international hub operators that will need to review their business model and reinvent themselves. They will be challenged to grow their hubs doing business as they were prior to COVID-19. I'm not saying this is caused by COVID-19, but it will be part of changes that we will see in the post-COVID-19 world. No doubt, as we see some airlines cease to exist, we will see new ones enter the market. For some reason, airline business seemed to investors globally an attractive investment. And just like what history have taught us, we will see more airlines come and go. Some airlines will see their fortunes change to the better. Airlines that will adapt to the new world. We will see mergers and acquisitions to consolidate. And now, the most important element of this industry, which is the human factor. Unfortunately, in many cases of restructuring and change, the most damage will be inflicted on employees. Therefore, it is essential for companies to take that into consideration and for individuals to assess their own circumstances and take appropriate measures to qualify themselves for different types of jobs, or be willing to relocate to where recovery might take place faster than their area. No doubt that some parts of the world will not be affected as bad as others. For example, local workforce in the Middle East, the Far East, and some parts of Africa will not be subjected to massive layoffs due to already existing shortages prior to COVID-19. As for which airline I think will make it through this crisis, it'll be airlines with good financial capabilities and backing will stay in the game. Airlines with weak financial status prior to COVID-19 will find it difficult to survive. Also, airlines will need to be creative in making up for the loss of revenue from business travelers. The low-cost business model will be the one to watch for the short and medium term, because the majority of travelers will be the personal travelers. And so they will be looking for the best deal possible. Full-service airlines will find it difficult to compete with low-cost airlines due to the reduced number of travelers. This situation might trigger some kind of protectionism as well. Governments might take some steps to protect their airlines from foreign competition. If the industry goes through this route, it will save some airlines and will hurt others. But we will definitely see degradation in service, efficiency, and competition. We will also kill part of this industry in the long term. This has been my take on the current crisis. I am sure I have not covered or forgot to cover many topics. Therefore, I invite you to comment and let us know what you think. We all in this as newcomers. We will definitely learn from each other's experiences. Please subscribe to the channel to receive more updates on new videos. Thank you and see you soon. Please stay safe.